Today on the fridge, I have my good friend, Jon Ruby. Jon Ruby is the co-founder of Carlington Booch, and also he's a pastor, and also you can say he's a bit of a stand-up comedian. He's an incredible human being doing incredible work in the city of Ottawa, and we're going to have an amazing conversation about addiction, mental health, social enterprise, and all things life.
Woo!
Bam!
What an intro. What an intro.
Can't help myself.
What's happening?
What's up, Johnny?
What's happening? What's happening? What's up?
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
We've been in this dungeon, the pit, the booch
The
pit.
booch bit? Let's not call it a dungeon.
No.
I like what it was referred to earlier, the womb.
The womb.
The womb. We're in the womb right now.
We're in the womb,
Yeah,
and this
yeah.
is where all the good stuff comes out
All the good
of.
stuff is birthed.
Is
if you will.
birth. You weren't always doing this stuff. You have a pretty checkered past. How did you get to a place where you are a pastor of a church, you're running a social enterprise, you've got a program where you're helping a lot of people? It's called, I think, LifeLab. I did go through it. An incredible program.
You're a model life labber, by the way.
I am a graduate.
Yeah, a graduate.
But, you know, you weren't always that guy.
You're starting to give me a panic attack.
I'm
like,
sorry.
How did this happen?
Yeah, how
Like,
did this
oh
happen?
my goodness.
Did you plan it? Did you?
There's no plan. I got sober. And you're gonna make me drink a kombucha. This is a This is a ginger kombucha.
Ooh, my favorite. I like it.
You got to do a little bit.
Yeah,
of
we.
a
Oh,
little
look
bit of
at
a
that.
stir.
And what's that bottom thing there? The Scoby?
That's just residue. It's all the good stuff.
Wow.
This is a living drink. It's full of probiotics and bacteria that is good for you, your gut health, and we want to be healthy even while we're. Ooh, look at that!
Love it.
Look at that. You're making me miss lunch, so we got Powerballs.
Yeah, we got
Cheers,
the Powerballs.
cheers to the Powerball.
Cheers to the Powerball.
Cheers to the Powerball.
And-
made by a Mennonite.
A Mennonite.
Yeah, Mennonite made.
Oh, you
Yeah.
do know I went to a Mennonite Bible school.
Did you?
Yes, I do know a little bit about the Mennonites.
Do you must have been, and I don't see, I see out of one lens and we're all the same, but you might have been the only dark how do we phrase that? African?
Well, not an African American.
We could just say black
It's
person.
called a black guy. That's all good. Yes, I was. In Saskatchewan, I was, I think, the only black guy in the entire school.
Imagine that. School of what? How many people?
Close to about 700 people.
Come on.
Yeah,
The only black guy.
the only black guy. So we were talking about you. How does this all start? Like, I mean, obviously, it didn't happen overnight. So tell me, like, you weren't always this, you know what?
What am I?
Well, you're now a functional member of this great society.
Okay. So in that regard.
Yeah.
Well, I think I always had this weird little gift in me to turn things into something other than what they were. I guess some would call it entrepreneurial. And so I remember, you ever watch that movie Kite Runner?
Oh, I love it.
Did you?
Loved it.
Dude, I lived that. I grew up in Asia. I was adopted.
Okay.
Flown to Indonesia.
Wow.
Bogar, right near Jakarta, the foothills of Bandung. And as a little person, you just dive into culture. And part of the culture was flying kites. And so they had the paper kites, and we would fly our kites. And for the first like 20 yards, you would have glass string.
Okay.
And we would have kite fights.
Oh, wow.
And
Kite
so,
fights.
where there's other kites, and there's a good density of kites, where there's another kite, you're pulling in, and you're trying to hit his string and cut it, and you win the fight. And it's the battle of the sky. So I grew up with that, and I just thought it was like just a secluded thing.
Yeah,
It was just in that little town, and then when I watched the movie Kite Runner, I was like, no, that's my child. That's how I grew up. So I remember running after kites and collecting them.
Wow.
And when they follow the sky, you run after, you grab them out of the air, and you got other kids fighting for them. And we lived right near like a real village in Indonesia. So very poor, poverty, grass hut kind of thing. And we lived kind of on the other side of the creek. So I would collect these kites. And I didn't plan it this way, but my parents were gone, and I thought that it would be appropriate that I set up a little table, a little booth, and sell the kites. And And then my parents came home and saw it. It reminded me of, in the Bible, they talk about Jesus flipping tables.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
happened. Little John Ruby trying to make a living in Indonesia. I get my tables flipped. My parents weren't happy. I was selling the kites back to the poor people.
Oh, dude.
But there was something in there, a
Yeah.
little spiritual.
Yeah.
It was a entrepreneurial spirit. I see these opportunities, and so I had a lot of stuff going on in here. And we lived in Asia for 9 years, and then came back to Canada in grade 7, 8, 9, and 10. I landed in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And all that stuff going on in my head. I had a lot of negative stuff. I had a lot of energy. I had some learning disabilities. I was diagnosed with ADD. Okay. Back then, there was no DDD. It was just the ADD and some slight dyslexia. I don't know if the booch boot goes that way or that way. To me, it doesn't make a difference. But when it comes to letters and numbers, it sure does. People
Slightly
care
mixed
about
up,
that
huh?
stuff. It's like no one cares what hand and what way the booch boot goes, but you spell a couple letters wrong on the booch bottle, people like...
Get worked up?
Yeah, they get worked up. It's like, come on.
Come on, just have a booch.
Take it easy.
Take it easy, yeah.
So we get back, and I got a lot of stuff going on
Yeah.
in here. And probably everybody experiences some sort of peer pressure. And
Wow.
I remember being strict rules because we were in Indonesia for missionary work. So I was adopted into this Christian family and Christian home, and I was a Christian myself and did the prayer when I was, I think, 9-ish or whatever. It was, my mom took me aside and we did this prayer, and I was a Christian.
Yeah.
And so I would say I grew up around God and never knew God, though. Never felt God, but grew up with God, around God, knew the Bible and that kind of thing. And then summer of going into grade 11, there was a party and I had alcohol for the first time.
Wow.
And I still remember drinking it and not really liking the taste, but feeling something here. And feeling a warmth, and then having another one. And I think from day one, and I know some people work into it, but I already had it, and it was just, the container was waiting to be filled, and I feel that I just need to fill it as quick as possible. So I didn't just have a couple beers to enjoy. I just chugged whatever was available, felt this warm, glowing sensation, and to me, that was what God was. That was God, and I just was like that feeling and that experience. I experienced it, and the noise shut down. I felt confident. I felt like I belonged. I felt a part of. I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong, except I might get in trouble when I got home. Yeah. But who cares?
Yeah,
it's now. We're living for the now, and I'm accepted by this people group. What I didn't realize as that noise quieted, a new battle began, and that was for my life. Wow. And so that drink took me 15 years into cocaine addiction, ecstasy, speed, all of the addictions of drug use and alcoholism, and having 2 children born out of wedlock, being in jail 4 different little breaks, a couple on this side and of the river and a couple on the Quebec side, and just really got into consuming, thinking, and planning how to do drugs, and which got me into the entrepreneurial end of things a little bit, and it was just all about having that thing to give me the peace that I was looking for. And so that ended in 2005. 2005 is when kind of you hit rock bottom. Whatever rock bottom is, I think in the life of an alcoholic or addict, rock bottom really is death. And so I think I've hit a lot of rock bottoms. I remember getting... we got in a little melee, and there was some fighting that happened, and the group of us got thrown in jail. Oh, wow. Due to what had happened. And I remember my parents coming to pick me up later the next day, and I remember my mom wrote a little note, and it said, "This is probably the worst day of your life." Wow. And it probably was at that point. I think I don't really know, but I just remember thinking of the consequences of actually being in lockdown and being charged with all this stuff, and then I look back and go, that wasn't very significant after I look at all the other things that happened. I was like, that was just getting started.
You're just warming up.
And then I think my mom wrote note after note after note, and probably said, this is probably the worst day of your life. So, you know, I think the worst day today sober is the best day using. So I don't really have a whole lot of bad days anymore. I can look back and go, man, that was... So rock bottom just kept going down. And I remember being in the elevator trade, and I got let go for missing work. Okay. And I was just filled with guilt and shame and failure, and that I was being punished.
Yeah.
And my addiction, what we've learned about addiction, it is fatal and it is progressive. Mm-hmm. And so my addiction was getting stronger and stronger, and I was having less control over how I consumed, and it just got out of hand. And then the company that I was working for laid me off and just said, you probably want to go speak to the union rep. And I was just filled with failure. Mm-hmm. And so I remember getting a box of wine and a 12 of beer. And I sat on my deck and I drank and I listened to angry music. And then I realized that my wife might come home, so I took off. Wow. And I wasn't seen probably for 3 days after that. And she didn't even know that I got let go. Wow. And so I just went on a bender to kind of end it all. Wow. I missed my son's birthday. I missed my wife's birthday kind of in the same month, just out of control using, and spiraled downhill. And then I kind of made the vow of, maybe it's better that I'm not here, because I'm hurting everybody that I care about, everybody that I love. And it just seemed hopeless. I never thought like not using was an option. I didn't know that was even possible. So I just went into a state of trying to not wake up. Wow. I wasn't planning on a big exit strategy. It was like the hope of doing enough, consuming enough, and then not waking up. And then they would be happy. I would... I'm not a disappointment anymore. Yeah, and then in this time, even at rock bottom, getting more rock bottoms in there, and my wife left and took the kid, everything gone. Wow. I remember coming home to an empty house, and I didn't know it was empty until I got to the bathroom. Wow. And I wanted to brush my teeth. I'm coming off a however many day bender, and I go to brush my teeth, and there's one toothbrush. And to me that was rock bottom. I'm alone. I have nothing. Everybody's gone. And I can't die. I keep waking up. And it was like, that's where my emotional state was. Spiritual state, physical state, it was empty. Wow. And, I look back and it's like, I want to die, but I don't want to hurt myself. And so I'm hurting everybody around me, but I don't want to hurt. And so it was a horrible, dark hole. Wow. And so that was my rock bottom, where there was no exit. It was like this psychotic state where as soon as I remember even using, but then producing like paranoia and like just even drinking. It's like everything's, my mind was leaving me. Wow. And my life kept going. And so I remember getting to this point of being in my vehicle in a parking lot and waiting for the next thing to do. I'd probably been up for 5-7 days. And a voice in my head said, as you were abandoned and abused, that's what you're doing to your loved ones and the people you care about. And I just thought that statement I had never thought of, because, being adopted out of whatever situation is usually a good thing. Yeah. In the adult mind, but in my heart, I had realized that there was a lot of pain there. And so with that statement, I just recognized my pain is what I'm giving to the people I care about most. Wow. And so then I saw 4 pictures in my head. I saw one dying a violent death. I saw one in a jail cell, and I saw another one in a white padded room in a straitjacket, and then I saw, static TV, and I felt compelled to pick one. And so I picked I'm very familiar with the first three, been in jail 4 times.
Yeah.
I've been in a lot of violent situations. The Beautiful Face is a compilation, a composition of my artwork in the world of violence. Yeah. And then I've been at the Royal Ottawa on a few occasions. And so I knew those options. And so I felt compelled to pick the static TV. And I believe that was the first time I became willing to investigate another life than what I've made. And so that was probably the first moment in my life of surrender. Amazing. To other than me. And I ended up at a homeless shelter, going to their treatment center, and they introduced me to the concept of me being God, and that I've played God. I wrote the book, I wrote the rules, I did what I wanted, how I wanted, and when I needed to change the boundaries, I would, and change the rule book at a moment's notice, change the compass of true north. Yeah. And so introducing me to this concept of me playing God, and that I needed to give God his job back. And really understanding, going through recovery with Alcoholics Anonymous and understanding the 12 steps, this process taught me that my drugs and alcohol were my solution, and I needed God as a solution. Wow. So I grew up with that solution, but never had it as a solution. Never felt it, never experienced it, but I've experienced drugs and alcohol at such a great level. It was my solution to the noise. And I remember going into rehab going, I don't know what's going to happen. I had no clue what I was getting into. Yeah. And I just said, as long as this shuts off, that's good. That's all I need. And so I got that and more, and that's why we're talking today, right? So I went through treatment and ended up taking the Alpha course at a church while I was at a homeless shelter, and it was my introduction to God. I still remember so clearly the first lesson. They trapped me because they say, if this Jesus character is not real, if this Bible isn't real, then it's a good way to live. At the very least, it's a good way to live. Yeah. It's positive. It's going to help you give to others, and it's going to put spiritual practices, emotional health back into your life. And that's the very least. If it's not true, it's going to help you live a good life. And then if it is true, it is your life. Wow. And I was like, you trapped me. Like, I was trapped. I was like, well, I'm trapped. And so through this process of recovery and the 12 steps actually led me to be able to feel and experience the solution, which I call God today. Amazing. And so that's if you said, how did you get to where you are, which you asked, I have no freaking clue, except one day I picked a static picture because I knew the other choices that I would end up to. So a very low planned. Yeah. We for me and my recovery, we just move forward. We just do, at the end of the 12 steps, it says having a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience, which doesn't have to be unicorns and rainbows. It can be where there was the spirit of John, where there's contempt, where there's where there's rage, where there's fear. Yeah. I get into a situation and there's peace and there's contentment. I walk into a room and I don't feel everybody's looking at me. That's a spiritual experience because my whole life was written about what you thought and you're all talking about. Wow. No one was actually looking at me. And so that is a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening. And then when you get to the end of this process, they say, pass on the message. Yeah. They don't say, go get a job. They don't say, go buy a house. They don't say, go get married. They say, pass on the message. So that has to be first and foremost. That my life has to fit into passing on the message, or I won't stay sober. And for that year, I tried to fit that message into my life. And until I fit my life into that message, then I stayed sober. And so I've been sober since 2006, August. Amazing. And so out of that message fitting into my life, or my life fitting into that message? There, see the dyslexia?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why we're here today. So everything I do has a purpose and a greater calling, because making money and making income and going to work for 8-hour days just to pay my bills isn't enough to keep me sober. It isn't a greater purpose. And God says, I will supply all your needs. I will bring you comfort. I will be your comfort. I will be your shepherd. If we're the vine, he is the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing.
I love it.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you take care of all my needs, which will give me, I don't have to do that anymore. And then I'll pass on the message. Because that's a higher purpose, where I'm actually going out and going, how do we pass on the message? So just like me selling kites or whatever, now we're selling a message of hope. And so kombucha now is a conduit of that. So when we're not selling a kombucha, we're not selling a drink, we're selling a story, we're selling a message of hope and restoration and a connection with God. And so if I can get sober, anybody can get sober. And you know, the stat of people that get sober and stay sober is 3%.
Wow.
So we really, as recovery people, have to buy into this concept of putting my life into recovery. And so the recovery, all they say is, at the end of this, pass on the message. And at the end of Jesus's teachings, it's like, go and make disciples. Don't be disciples, go make disciples.
Yeah.
And so be recovered. Don't, you can only be recovered if you stay in recovery. It's a little trap, but
I gotcha.
Recovery to me is, passing on the message, being there for somebody else to bring them into the new solution, which is a relationship with God. And so that's kind of been the last 15 years of my life, or however long that's been. Yeah, man. Powerball time.
So you obviously from day one had this gift and this ability to build things. As you said earlier, here you were selling kites to a bunch of people that did not need
Which
kites.
is not illegal, by the way.
No, it's not.
I don't
Technically,
think so.
probably not. Just
morally, maybe
morally,
not the
wrong.
Missionary kid.
Yeah, the missionary kid. It's like selling ice to Eskimos. It's a little. It's not something.
Anyway,
that they need.
so I don't think I broke the law.
Yeah, but so what you essentially, this was something that was inside of you, that you always had this ability, this gift, even in the days when you were dealing drugs. You were
Well, easy now. That sounds like an accusation.
well.
What do you do? I need to call
Maybe
I'm just calling the lawyer right now.
there is a statute of limitations, so don't worry. No police officer is going to come here. You did nothing wrong. You were just providing a very important service at the time. But essentially, that gift was still there. It was just being misused. But then once you really connected with your higher purpose, that gift has flourished and all this stuff has come about it. So what would you say to that person or individual that is also maybe listening to this podcast and go, wow, okay, I'm going to go out there and build me a social enterprise. I'm going to go there and find a church. What would you say to that guy or gal?
It's hard because it depends if you're like, so what's the purpose of what we're doing? What's the purpose of behind anything we do? And so I guess the world would say more about income and the kingdom of God would say impact. So I think there's two different sides of it where you have the world about, how do we profit, but then because of this profit, then how do I give back? And we get into social enterprise. Or social justice movements. It's like, here's my mountain, I'm going to die on this, and whether it's climate change or and a myriad of things that we won't bring up. But with the kingdom of God, the core of the purpose is to help others into a relationship with God. So then how do you do it? Through our own gifting, I think we can still have the same call, but do it in a different way. So not everybody's going to do what I do. Not everybody's going to do what you do. And that's great. We're supposed to be a body with different moving parts, and we can't all be middle fingers. I mean, thumbs, whatever.
Is that the dyslexia
Yes,
too?
I don't know. And so
Yeah.
for me, when I got to the point where I was back in a trade that I have. I drive tractor trailers and heavy equipment and stuff, and so I got back into that after treatment. It's like kind of got the family all back together, and restoration process started to happen. And then the obvious, because I have an intellect, I have a mind that I can think, I have these needs, and I know how to provide for them. I know how to pay my bills.
Yeah.
I know how to do all this stuff financially. And I've been trained for my life to do that. So I got back into moving dirt. And so moving dirt costs you about 8-9 hours a day every day.
Yep.
And it takes the better part of my day. And I remember going one day, coming up to the yard, and I drove big stuff. And when there's a little bit of rain and there's clay, the big toys don't like to play in that.
Yeah.
So we took the day off. I went down to my dad's and bugged him for breakfast, and then we watched a learning video. And the learning video was about seek ye first the kingdom of God. It's a Bible scripture. Don't worry about all this stuff. Seek first God, and then you get all this stuff. And I'm like, that's brilliant. I never thought of that before. That is the concept of fitting my life into God. And I don't think you have to be a crackhead or an alcoholic to fit your life into God. That's how you're going to get sober, because God's now your solution. But I think it's anybody that wants to be a Christian, and anybody with faith, is put your life in the hand of God. And he'll give you all those things. And so I took that seriously. I took it to heart, going like, man, what's the point of what I'm doing? To pay my bills isn't good enough. And if you say you're going to do that, hey, lucky break for me, because now I could do something else. So that day I quit my job.
Wow.
And I just went wherever God was. I went to this Bible study, this AA group, this coffee house, all these things. I went to them just to volunteer and be around God. I didn't look for a job. I said, you get me a job, you got me sober, and I'm not going to help you. You probably don't need the help. I just want to see where this goes, to see if this is the truth.
Yeah.
And whenever I see promises and truth, in my life, and I put it kind of to the test, where it's like, okay, you're going to pay my bills, then let's do that. But I can't let you do that if I'm going to continue to do it. So that's what I did. And I think it was about 9 months. And then finally, Ray D brought me into his office. He was the founder of Jericho Road Ministries. It was a housing ministry for mentally ill guys and a little bit of the addiction side. And he brought me into his house, into his room, his office, and he said, hey, how about, would you like a job at one of the care homes overnight?
Yeah.
And it was the first time I had a tear in my eye when I was offered a job.
Wow.
And so I remember making my budget, and my wife was working, and I remember the budget, and I remember when I got my pay, and it was minimum wage back then. So it was like nothing. And I'm pretty qualified. I know the worth that I am. As a man, we go, this is what I'm worth, because this is my trade, elevator trade. This is what you're making. It's way up there. As a truck driver, it's good too. And heavy equipment, like you get paid. That's my worth. That's who I am as a man. And then I get this minimum wage job, which I treat as a real job. Like I'm not, the pay didn't determine how hard I worked. I went in there to work, and there's no, either you're working or you're not working. So it didn't matter what I got paid. But then I realized it was $200 a month over what we needed.
Wow.
So that in turn was the provision of doing service work for God to do a higher purpose, and actually doing the work actually paid for my bills. And it's brilliant because I've never done anything like it. I've never worked with mentally ill people. I've never, like, I have no clue even how to do it. And so there's on the job training and all this. And so, that was the beginning of getting into the concept of building containers for passing on the message. So within about 8 months or so, Ray D asked me if I wanted to kind of engage on the addiction side of things. There was a second stage home for guys that, you know, coming out of detox. It was just more of a holding, more of a option for guys for a safe place, but there was no real supervision. And then he just said, he tasked me with the job of creating the addiction program inside, and he goes, however you got sober, let's see what happens. So within a little bit of time, we started the Discipleship program, and it was more about serving and learning the Bible and the recovery, the kind of the 12-step process. And so there was like 2 guys that signed up, both whom are sober today.
Wow.
And that means it has nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing, because I probably like hurt them more than anything, and had no clue really what I was doing. But we put this together as the concept of bring a holistic approach of bringing somebody into an emotional, spiritual, physical health, and we put this program together with the disease model, and then kind of the 12-step methodology. And so then I was there for 8 years. Wow. I never thought I would leave. It was my own little island that I lived on. And the addiction house grew to 12 beds. I think at the most we had 11, 12 beds. We probably had 4 paid staff, including myself, and then a myriad of volunteers. And so at the end of that, it's still running today, and a couple of the guys that have actually graduated have been working at Jericho Road and now have taken the treatment center over. I sit on the board, so I go there once a week to teach, and the guys come to our church, and through even kombucha, we take up donations to give back to them. And so we're still part of that. But 3 years ago, I got the opportunity to step down and leave and start something else. You know what? So you got a full mouth there. You know, I leave Jericho Road. Never thought that I would, but I just God had given me a greater vision of now what Jericho Road, 9 guys, 12 guys, or whatever, and a 9-month rehabilitation process. And it was demanding. There was a lot going on there.
Sure
and then it was.
I was there, remember?
As a client for...
No, not as a client.
They locked you down for like 3 days.
I should have been there as a client.
It's a very, very, very fine line of who actually lives there, should live there, and needs to live there.
You know, I always use the concept of the player coach. You know, so every so often, you know what, I should be the patient, also I can contribute and help. But I don't remember. I you know, because you and I had a bit of a relationship, and so I brought one guy.
Yeah, I remember that day.
And you and I spent some very memorable moments running around, and cops showed up. So I mean, the life that you were leading, and the level of stress, and the challenge of working with guys that are dealing with this disease. It's pretty intense. So how did you, that's a good conversation piece. So how do you transition now? How did you get to?
Well, God started putting a greater vision to, like, now what? What happens after 9 months? Where do we go? For me, getting sober was easy. Like going to rehab, it's like, actually, when you look at the grand scheme of life, there's real no commitments except like show up at meals and counseling and do some projects. And I remember being in that safe container and then getting out and going like, holy crap, there's a lot of responsibilities here. I remember going camping for the first time. I was anxious because camping I equate with beer, right? Me going camping was make sure we got coolers of ice and beer, and let's grab a pack of hot dogs. And so I remember camping after a few years of getting sober, and I was anxious because it was kind of like, this is the first time I'm reintroducing myself into a drinking environment that I had. And so I remember setting up the tent and getting rid of the goose poo and getting everything set up, blowing up the air mattress, the bedding, all this stuff. You know, the little the kitchenette and the tent and the little gazebo. And I remember sitting down and the sun's almost on the way down, and I just remember thinking, whew, that was exhausting. How did I do this drunk? And it's like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
The responsibility of life is overwhelming after rehab.
Wow.
And so if we can create containers of moving people into the full responsibility of life, that's what God was really putting on my heart. Now what? How do we keep building community? Because part of AA is about unity and service and recovery and building a community.
Yeah.
And so that's really what God was tasking me to do, is really plant a church.
Yeah.
And so I'm jaded church kid, and I'm like, church, I don't even think it's relative even like today.
Yeah.
It's like if the church in Ottawa or Canada left, I don't think many people's lives would be affected or changed. And I know I'm making a blanket statement. I know that's not true of every church culture, and I think God's doing something new. The Spirit of God is blowing on the sparks, and I think there's a new flame being produced, and so I'm really encouraged with that, and I think that we're a part of that. And so I left. I never thought I'd leave Jericho, and then I left to do the next part. And I know that I was taken out of the Jericho situation because there was able people to take it over, and God wanted me to do something new. And so we planted a church, Union City Church. And the whole point is to ignite hope, ignite freedom, and really walk people into discipleship in a greater scale, and then be community for them. And so discipleship is really important. I developed out of my experience from LifeLab, or from rehab and my own recovery. I put LifeLab together. So LifeLab is like rehab for, normal people like the cameraman. Although double taking him, he don't look so normal. I might need a rehab.
Yeah.
And so this is a process of gaining spiritual experience through the 17-week series that I was able to develop. And so that's the core of church, and why we do it is to build disciples. And then once somebody graduates, then they can help somebody else through the process. We call them pace setters. So it's somebody it's just the concept of disciples that make disciples. Don't get stuck being a disciple. We got to reproduce and make disciples. So that's the LifeLab. And then out of that has come this thing that we call Ashes to Rubies, and it's a movement of giving hope to being light in the dark. We have an enemy, the Bible says, and to overcome that enemy, we got God, the blood of the Lamb, and we got our word of our testimony. So speaking our stories, whether you're in the middle of whatever, and life's not great, but the vulnerability behind that, the vulnerability of talking about being hurt as a child and sexually abused or whatever it is. Some of these stories are really heavy, and we do this last Thursday of every month at our space, and we'll get 80 to 120 people out to every show, and we share 3 short stories. We share spoken word, poetry, hip hop, singer-songwriter stuff, anything to give people a platform to share their hope through their vulnerability. And really that whole concept brings people out of their shame and their jail cells, and so that's been really encouraging. Hopefully they come to our Sunday stuff and our Wednesday stuff. We do a Bible study and a worship service, worship and prayer, kind of learn the spiritual concepts, and then Sundays more community. We teach the Bible, and we worship God through music. And so hopefully through these containers that people will come into our community and really be discipled. But my job is to lead people to the one that has all the answers. Imagine. People ask me trap questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about this gender stuff? And it's like, man, I don't, Why? Why do you care? You're just trying to trap me. I'll take you to somebody that can answer. And that's our goal as disciple makers, is take people to the solution and stop trying to be the solution. My job is just to get out of the way. And so part of this church plant thing, I was like, you know, it can't just be a Sunday service and let's do Bible study and prayer meeting. Like, oh my goodness. So I think social enterprise has always been on my heart. I didn't really know the language to it. And really, that's not a real word. Like Revenue Canada doesn't be like, oh, great social enterprise, guys. And it's a related business. So there's a lot of this whole movement of social enterprise. Most of them aren't social enterprise. They might have a social impact or an environmental impact, which is great. We actually fall under a charity. We're a not-for-profit. And so we fall and meet the guidelines for a social enterprise or a related business as CRA is concerned. And so the goal is to hire people. We want to kind of bridge that gap. We found a social enterprise. This is the concept, is that I wanted to either have a product or a service. There's some advantages and disadvantages to having either one of those as a core of a social enterprise. I picked product, and then me and my boutonniere partner, we thought about kombucha. Had tried it about 3 years ago with a cigar, and I was like, this pairs well. It's not super sweet. It's light. It's not alcoholic, and it's great. And so we tried to develop kombucha to see if we could brew it for 9 months in my basement, and flavors and all this stuff. And I love that artistic. I love doing that. And so we're just doing this as a hobby just to see if we could do it. And then last summer we were able to enter the farmers markets and start brewing commercially. And the goal behind this is to booch the gap. Kombucha booch the gap for guys and girls coming out of early recovery and give them some responsibility, some employment, some income in a safe environment that they can flourish and ask questions to people that have been sober a little bit longer. And so that's our goal, is to booch the gap. And so we really want to be a light in our communities where other people are drinking it and going, hey, I'm helping fight addiction because one, we're giving back to the community and taking addicts and alcoholics into a safe environment. That was the hardest part getting sober, was this 9 to 5 and the demand and the responsibility. I couldn't even handle camping properly. That stressed me out. I'm like, how does anybody do this without alcohol?
Yeah.
And so I want to really provide a safe environment that nurtures people in their recovery, that doesn't have the 9 to 5 demand on them. And it's about booching the gap. And then we give you that good gut feeling in the community that we're making a difference and that we're giving back. And so a portion of proceeds go back into our community and addiction related projects. And then we want to be self-sustaining as well. So we're all about impact and not income. And so this year, just recently, we hired a girl that's been in recovery for 3 years, has a young child, and now this child is going to school, whatever daycare stuff, and now it's like she's got to do something. So now she's getting involved, and she's committed to 1 day a week right now, and then we got a guy that graduated rehab about a month ago, and he's going to run the farmers market and be the voice and do some sales like that in a safe environment, and gives his story a voice as well, because we're getting in front of people, and so that's kind of the aspects that we have, is this umbrella of Union City Church. It's the church. At the core of it is discipleship with the LifeLab, and then the containers of ashes to rubies, getting our stories out, and then kombucha is booching the gap into better communities and really helping fight addiction, man. It's a epidemic. So it's not like I'm trying to find buzzwords. We are the buzzwords. We're guys and girls that have survived our disease and that are putting it in remission by passing on the message and helping other people, not being income focused, but being impact focused. And so we use kombucha, we use our Ashes to Ruby clothing and our shows, and then our church is about building community and being salt and light in our culture. And if Union City leaves, I want people to notice it. Like what happened to those guys? And so we're in a building phase. We're just putting legs to things, and it's been a lot of work, but it's been fun and rewarding. And we, with the kombucha especially, we've got into places that the church could never get into.
Yeah.
So praise loud. Yeah.
Dog.
I'm taking the last.
You should. You deserve it.
I'm taking the last
Because
freaking
you know
Baba.
what? You this was incredible. Getting on a more serious note, is the work that you're doing is incredible. I know I'm the beneficiary of that, and you do recall when you and I connected, I wasn't doing so well. A burnt out pastor, didn't want to talk to anyone.
I remember I want to connect with you, and
Yeah.
you don't show up to Starbucks on our date.
Yeah, I did.
We're like, whoa,
I
he's
did.
in rough shape.
I was in rough.
That bro is
yeah.
in rough shape.
And
So then I upped it. The next meeting was at
Oko's.
yeah,
that's-
for a meal.
That gourmet.
For some odd
gourmet burgers.
reason, you made it to them.
You know what? That
Guided by the Spirit. Eh?
guided by the Spirit and guided by the
I don't
gut.
know what Spirit, but
But and LifeLab really was transformational for me. Really helped me. And this is the part that I think a lot of us. I know I went.
yeah, dude, you're in. Like you've drank the Kool-Aid. I mean kombucha. You've done the LifeLab.
I'm in.
You're in.
I'm in, and it's just incredible. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are living these really dissatisfied lives, and
Is
dealing with,
dissatisfied a word?
well,
Or is it unsatisfied?
unsatisfied,
Or is
dissatisfied. I think we can use both words. Yes,
Okay.
According to Webster's dictionary, I'm sure we're on the right path.
it, somebody Google that.
The point is that we do have a lot of people that are pretending to have it all. I just talked to somebody just a few days ago, and working for the government, just really dissatisfied and blaming everybody and anybody. And as we talked, it was the realization that the problem was actually him. That the problem was actually here in the inside. And I think the work that you're doing is really is that you're helping people to get to the heart of the matter. And I know you did that. You helped me do the work. And I remember that the first class where you had all the dots. No, actually, that was before
black
the
dots.
dots. No, you grew with some wisdom. At the beginning, you brought trash and dumped it on the
Brought
table.
the trash, yeah.
And it was just to illustrate.
Well, the black dots are the wounding, the experiences that create my belief system. So the black dots are the experience that happened in my life.
Yeah.
The ones that we really don't remember, the early ones, and those black dots on a whiteboard represent a garbage pile. And so discipleship is all about getting rid of the garbage so that we can have a spiritual experience, so God can come in. Remember we looked at the corner store?
Yeah.
Your heart as a corner
Yeah,
store?
yeah.
I'll remember that. The heart as your corner store, and you got your taco kit
Yeah.
from the 70s,
Yes.
and you got your Chef Boyardee from the 80, 81, 82. It's embarrassing, man.
Yeah.
It's taking up room on that, and you're trying to pawn it off on people. Discount prices. It's embarrassing.
And it was
We
incredible.
got to take that stuff off.
so good.
For
It's
the
so
stuff of God.
And the thing about it is that I, at the time, even for myself, because we want to pretend like we're whole and we're perfect and so forth and so on. And we are. We're righteous in Christ. But the reality is there's a lot of crap that we're dealing with. And I know for me, on a personal level, it was the realization that I was passively living my life. And a lot of denial. And having to come to that reality and address the wounding was really powerful. And so just amazing work. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. It's incredibly significant, and it's impacting so many lives. And what would you say to the person that's watching it right now and is feeling really dissatisfied and going, life sucks? Maybe they're using, maybe they're addicted to porn. I don't know. But what would you
Maybe
say?
they're smoking crack, Joe.
They might be smoking crack.
Out of a bong made out of a
Yeah.
boot with kombucha. in it.
Exactly. But what would you say
Probably
to that
took
guy?
that too far, eh?
Because there's a lot of people in our culture right now that are living very painful lives and self-medicating. What would you say to that as we leave?
I would say that to anybody, there's hope of a new way. And I would say that there's a greater purpose for your life. There's a greater purpose for your life to do something impactful and positive. And I think that's the hardest part, is trying to go from income to impact. It's like I'm surviving to I'm flourishing. So I think that's the hardest part, but you got to get to a place where you desire that. You're longing for a better and greater purpose, and it's out there. So I think that's what I would say. I don't know what I'd say. What I'd say to you, let's go for lunch. You just build relationships, man. And just see, cool. I see things in people that maybe they don't see themselves. Yeah. And we just want to build into that, encourage that. And so it's a lot of hard work, taking care of yourself and striving. And there's so much depression and anxiety today with our smartphones, and it's just exploding. Yeah. And it's like, what's the point of this? That's and so cool. I think, the point is let everything else that has been your solution, put that down and fit God into your life instead of trying to fit your life into something else. Whether, you do that with any addiction, you fit your life into the addiction. You don't think you're doing it, but you bring addiction into your life, whether it's smoking a little joint here and there, whether it's drinking a little bit of alcohol or getting into the hard stuff or clicking stuff on the internet or even your cell phone or anything. You're putting it into your life, but at some point it turns the tables and takes over your life. And so if you're at that point of being sick of it, there's a better way out. There's another solution. And so our job is to bring you to that solution. Our job is always to bring you to the higher solution, the higher power. And we call him Jesus. We call him Father God. And you have a relationship through Jesus. And our goal is to bring you through that. And at LifeLab, we bring you up the mountain to have a spiritual experience. Kind of like Moses. Went up the mountain, comes down glowing, freaking people out. We want to freak people out. We want to be like... We're here to make an impact. Yeah. We don't need paychecks. God takes care of me. God will take care of you because he says he will. Yeah. And his word is good.
Amen. That's amazing, man. So, LifeLab, what can they, I know you're putting this thing online.
Yeah, we got it online. Go to the website, ashesTorubies.com. You can be a LifeLab member. Yeah. So click on the membership. We got our content videos from our shows up there. We got our LifeLab membership to take the LifeLab itself, 17-week series. You get a buddy, you get the downloadable book, and you get the private Facebook group.
Amazing.
Yeah, so join us on ashesTorubies.com. LifeLab is right then and there, and we got our Ashes to Rubies apparel gear in the shop, so you can get some clothing, you can get some LifeLab into you, and we can connect.
And you can drink some kombucha.
Well, yeah, maybe. Not online yet.
Not online yet. Amazing, man. Thank you so much for doing this. Love you.
Hey, love you too.
Peace. Man, that was probably one of my favorite podcasts. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. We look forward to seeing you again next week.